Welcome back to Big Fellas. How you doing, Darren? You all right, mate?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. Let's dive straight in on this one. This is a big topic, and it's something that's always been on my mind. Emotional eating. It's a real thing. And I think anyone who's suffered with their weight, that's something that's probably played on them quite a lot. I've had lots of experiences of that myself. I'm sure you have, yeah?
Yeah, definitely, mate. Definitely. And it's something that I don't really understand that much as well. Like, I think I do it a lot, probably. So it'd be really good today to get a bit more of an understanding of it. And then hopefully, if you understand it, I suppose you can address it a bit better.
Yeah, it's equipping yourself with the knowledge, isn't it? And I think that's the most important thing. So we've got an exciting guest today, gentleman called Sam Gibson, author of the book, Why We Overeat and How to Stop for Good. Let's welcome him in. Hello, Sam. How are you, mate?
Great, mate. And I'm buzzing to see that the book made it in time because I only posted it on
Yes.
Monday. So, hey, it got there.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd be able to get it out on the episode
Yeah,
and actually
absolutely.
have a physical copy. So there you go.
Yeah, that'll be all over the YouTube. Don't worry.
I love having a guest on that's written a book as well, because it shows like, you know, the problem is when you do a podcast is you don't really know how much people know. But to publish a book, there's no, you can't blag that, can you? Like, you've got to have the knowledge. So this will be a really interesting episode, I think, about a subject that actually we probably should have covered way before now, to be honest, Mark. So, yeah, let's get into it. So what is it you do, Sam, day to day? What is it you do with emotional eating and stuff?
Yeah, so I guess I would categorize myself as three things. Obviously, I'm an author now. I've got, like you said, it's legit. It's on Amazon. It's out there. I think 300 and odd people have bought this so far. But my main day job, if you will, is my coaching business. I've coached people for about 10 years now. Wasn't always emotional eating. Started off as personal training, but I've gravitated over the years. 2020, when the lockdown started, that's when I was kind of in a bit of a predicament with what I wanted to do for a job, what I wanted to do for a career. The gyms were shut, obviously, so 2020 was the perfect time for me to pivot into what I'd been thinking about doing for a few years, which was helping people who struggled with similar things I did back in the day. I guess, I mean, I never went to the doctors or anything. You can imagine the male ego of not wanting to speak up, not wanting to ask for help. And I guess a little bit of denial, but I would have been diagnosed with an eating disorder, possibly binge eating disorder, definitely anorexic/orthorexic behavior, and maybe even a little bit of bulimia as well. You know, so my background was like a fitness model. I did bodybuilding shows, and I was a personal trainer, and I definitely did have a negative attachment to my body image, and that drove a lot of dysfunctional or disordered eating behaviors. So fast forward to 2020, when I'd kind of dealt with that, some of the frameworks I talk about in the book from my own experience, I saw similar things happening with clients. And then when the lockdowns happened and I wasn't able to personal train anymore, I just went for it, and I've been coaching people just online, but also in person as well when we do events and live trainings, specifically on overcoming emotional eating and other various eating disorders. So my day job is coaching people one-to-one and in groups as well. And I guess I do speaking events now and again. Some of them are ticketed, some of them are just live workshops, some of them are my own events that I put on. So I do a combination of writing, you know. Obviously, fairly recently I wrote the book that took 7 months. And then I do speaking engagements, speaking gigs, I call them. And then my day job is I've got about 40 clients who I work with one-to-one in my coaching program. So yeah, that's what I do on a daily, weekly basis. And that's kind of a background of how it started as well.
Awesome. And so, yeah, like we said, emotional eating, overeating, it's prevalent amongst anyone that suffers with their weight. And I'm sure we've got our own stories of this. I think one that I've brought up a few times on the show is there was a time back in 2008 where I got fired from a job. I had my lunch on the way down, had a meeting at like 2:00, sit in the office. My boss delivers the bad news that you've been fired and hand back your stuff and everything. And so I'm feeling quite shit. And what's the first thing I do? I walk across the road and go and have a McDonald's in just the middle of the afternoon because I felt shit, and it was just like I needed some sort of comfort, and that was it. The golden arches were there. And when I first sort of got in contact with you, that was one of the first things I thought about. Was there's been plenty of incidences of like sort of like where I found myself emotionally eating, and that one always stands out for me. What about you, Darren? Have you had any?
Yeah. Yeah, that actually, Sam, was going to be a question that I asked. I find that I reward myself for food. So I don't think for me, emotional eating is all about the negative. It's about the positive. Is that normal?
So there is no clinical definition of it. That's why it's so, like you said at the start, like I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is. So this is a very general term, okay? So I'm going to go two different angles here. I've psychoanalyzed you both based off your very quick answers there about your experience with it. And my brain's connecting patterns. That's what I do for a living. So what you said, Mark, was about, it was clearly you've thought of the past. There was a situation that come to my mind. I got sacked from my job or fired from my job, and I wanted some comfort. So let's stick with that word for a second. You were looking for some comfort because you felt maybe rejection, maybe not good enough, maybe this trigger of being fired from your job, maybe it represented some previous experience where you felt hugely rejected in another area, and that feeling of discomfort was uncomfortable, as the word is. So you were looking for comfort. So it was an act of self-soothing, and you can go down the line and think about every behavior and why did it happen, and go underneath the event and look at the emotion. So you've got a little bit of a theme then. Maybe that was a recurring thing. And then what you said there, Darren, about maybe it's not an emotional trigger where I'm upset or rejected or angry, or it was when I want to reward myself. Okay, so maybe that's more of your pattern. So the answer is no, everyone's different. And this is why we've got to have conversations to go like, what's actually happening? What's your most dominant pattern? What emotions is behind the binge or the overeating episode? What events, what situations? Was it a certain environment? Was it a person? Was it a particular word or a conversation? So there is no real definition. This is why we've got to actually converse about it and figure out what people's dominant patterns are, triggers, certain situations. But to answer your question, Darren, about the rewarding, well, food it's a dopamine giver, right? So there's a lot of times massively linked to ADHD kind of eating this. That's a whole other category. I could probably write another book on overeating or eating disorders with ADHD or neurotypical brains. That's a whole thing that we can talk about. It's a dopamine thing, same why people scroll or another form of comfort. It's dopamine seeking. So once you've had a taste of dopamine, you feel good, you're impulsive, you're like, wow, I feel amazing, I want more of this, so I've recognized that as well. If I had a really good day at work or a really good week, or, let's get a takeaway. Like, how easy is it to make that assumption in your brain? And you almost don't even realize you're doing it. So it doesn't have to be, I'm triggered in a bad way and I'm really sad, or I'm, that picture in your mind that you'd think of, like Bridget Jones sitting on the sofa, singing into the hairbrush at the start of the movie, and she's like clearly comfort eating. That's like the connotation we have of the emotional eater, but it's not all that. It's way more complex. It's way more pattern specific. And like I say, there is no like, oh, you are this, you are that. It's just, let's understand someone on an individual level. Let's get themselves to understand and start going down patterns. So you might notice that becomes a dominant pattern. Someone else might notice they have a different one. So it's all pattern specific and it's all individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's really interesting because I think you're right. I think the interesting thing with this is that we are all very different. So, for example, me and Mark might be very different emotionally and how we deal with our emotions, how we understand emotions. And it's just sort of got me wondering. You say at the moment you're working with about 40 people. I'm really interested to know what sort of breakdown of that is. And then following on from that, the other thing I was thinking whilst you were talking there is that I suppose my eating become worse when my mental health was at its lowest a few years back.
Oh, yeah.
So do you see often a connection between mental health problems and emotional eating, if you like?
It's more than a connection. It's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. So this is what a lot of people say when they join my program. They're like, Sam, I thought I was literally just going to be working on my eating, which I am, but it's this whole other stuff underneath the surface that is actually the problem. So I want to just pattern it right now, regardless of the different pathway that someone leads to overeating, what emotion, what situation, what circumstances. The reality is it's an act of self-soothing. It is filling a void. It is not wanting to deal with an emotion, or it's looking for a distraction. So it's all related to emotions. It's all related to soothing. So back to what Mark said before about I wanted comfort. Well, think about what a baby does. A baby can't regulate its emotions. A baby can't articulate, why do I feel sad? Why do I feel this? It's got no recollection of that. It's just a baby, right? So it cries. It doesn't know how else to communicate. And that's hardwired on our brain. When we cry, we feel discomfort. Here's mum feeds baby, we feel comforted. And although we can't remember that, that is psychologically wired on our brain, thousands of repetitions, right? So it's not a coincidence that when all humans are in a feeling of discomfort, what's the most primal, like, survival mechanism? What would we definitely care about if we were on a desert island everything else would go out the window and would just care about eating food. So comfort eating is almost like a primal way to say, like, I don't like how I feel. And because I've remembered this thousands of times on my brain, all unconscious, by the way, we're not literally thinking it in the moment unless we're aware, you're seeking comfort in any way possible. So the same way someone would spend money on Amazon when they're bored and they're just looking for a dopamine hit, or gamble when they're at work and they hate their job, so they're on their phone playing casino or whatever, or the same way someone would drink alcohol after a hard day and wanting to unwind. We're just looking for comfort in some sort of way, shape or form. But what separates like comfort eating or overeating, they're all words for the same thing really, is that we can't just cut it out. We've got to eat. So we've got to kind of untangle how is our relationship with food formed. And a lot of it, like you said, Darren, goes into trauma responses, mental health issues, suppressing emotions. And again, that's very pattern specific for the individual. So to answer your question about, is it massively linked to mental health? Well, absolutely. You know, I've got some stats from you from this book, actually. It's not from my book, but I do reference it. Nicole LePera, How to Be the Love That You Seek. So this has been kind of proven after a meta-analysis in America, of course, which will obviously translate to like Europe and cultures like that, 4 times more likely to have an eating disorder, specifically binge eating disorder, if you've went through sexual abuse, emotional neglect, things like that. So it's massively linked to trauma. It really is. Now, that's not to say everyone's overeating because they're traumatized. It's just saying that it's associated, it's correlated, and it's more than just a correlation. There is causation as well. So it is linked to trauma. It is linked to emotions. It is linked to mental health. I think on the low level, it could be someone's bored, so they overeat. On a serious level, it could be it's a trauma response from sexual assault or something like that. It really could be that deep. There's no right or wrong. There's no set, diagnoses. It's just patterns that we've got to observe. And it's all individual, and we'll have to understand the backstory. I'm a big Carl Jung fan. He Swiss psychologist from the 20th century. He would spend weeks at a time just talking to his patients, asking them about their family, their parents, their hobbies, what they like to do, getting them to open up a little bit, because you reveal a lot about someone's psyche when you just understand them. So that's how we help someone with their eating. It's like understanding what got them to this point, how they're feeling, maybe what they use food for, and seeing if we can bring out some patterns. And then we'll start seeing causes, links, and all that sort of stuff. But you can't compare one person to the other because it's apples and oranges. It's someone's life over here versus someone's life there, and that's when it gets complex.
Cool. I think one thing that's sort of bugging me was like emotional eating. It's not driven by hunger per se. Like I said, the day I got fired from a job, I'd had my lunch on the way down. And so, what is the difference between, say, physical hunger and emotional hunger? Because logically, if you're not hungry, why are you eating? But
yeah,
we do.
Yeah. So that's one of the first questions you can actually ask yourself to create awareness and snap out of just that autopilot eating. And rather than beating yourself up in that instance, going, oh, why have I done that again? I'm so greedy. That's all crap. That's never going to help you. That's all limiting beliefs and self-depreciating, negative self-talk. We're never going to find the answers we seek thinking like that. So what I've got to do is stop and observe ourselves. Like, what was I doing in the car? Clearly I wasn't hungry. I ate my lunch earlier on, so I definitely know it wasn't hunger. But what was it? Well, I'd just been fired from my job. Okay, well, what emotions was I feeling in that moment? And if I think about that now, what does it evoke within me? Well, a bit of this, a bit of that. Okay, now we'll start building a picture. Whereas if someone was like, oh my God, I overate there, and then they can go, well, I didn't eat since like 3 days ago. Well, it probably is hunger. You know what I mean? So you've got to kind of work through it. And this is what a lot of clients who come to me say. They're like, Sam, I know I'm not hungry. And it drives me crazy thinking, why do I want more food? Why do I want more food? So that's when I'll go, right, well, what were you really feeding? Was it lack of fulfillment that day? Was it boredom? Was it loneliness? Where are you disconnected? And that's one of the frameworks I talk about in the book. I know it came to you this morning, Mark, but I doubt you've read 350 pages in the last few hours, so you probably haven't seen it yet. But there is a framework in the book that I call the 7 voids. And this is actually something Johan Hari talked about. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, really great author on mental health. He's got a book on Ozempic and the GLP-1 drugs. He's got a book on ADHD, stolen focus, and he's got a book on mental health and anxiety and depression, lost connections. So he talks about the 7 voids, the 7 causes of depression. There's like 9 root causes of depression. 2 of them are like biological, brain chemistry, that sort of stuff, genetics. The other 7, they're all environmental. They're like disconnection with your job, disconnection with your relationships, a lack of hobby, a lack of joy, limiting beliefs due to traumas, disconnection from the environment, some sort of environmental barrier, you know, lack of connection to community, not feeling safe in your relationship. So there's all these environmental voids. So one of the first things I do if I have a consultation with a client is I get them to open up about, well, what are you experiencing regarding these voids? And they might say, oh, I love my job. You know, I get so much fulfillment from it. But actually, now that I talk about it, my marriage is like on the rocks, you know, like I'm really struggling with that. And okay, maybe I am comfort eating, you know, because of that. I always say food can take the place of a lover that you don't have. It can take the place of a safe, stable relationship with a parent that you never got. It can take the place of a sense of community that you don't feel a part of. It can take the place of a hobby that you don't have. Like how, even when I was a PT years ago, if I had a client who would come in, and I wouldn't even be doing emotional eating coaching then, but if I had a client who would come in and I'd talk to them, you know, as you do, you become friends with them. And they'd be, oh, what are you doing after work? Oh, nothing. You know, what are you doing over the weekend? Oh, nothing. They're the people that come in on Monday and say, oh, I binged all weekend. And I'm like, yeah, because all you do is go to work, come to see me 3 times a week at the gym, go home and scroll on your phone for 6 hours, then wait to go back to work. It's like, you've got no fulfillment in your life. So food's now your hobby. And I say it in the book as well, if the most exciting thing in your life that you've got going for you is what you can eat in front of Netflix on a nighttime after work, then you've got a problem. Not a food problem. That's a symptom of what's missing in your life. So food is actually the symptom. It's the natural consequence of certain causes or certain root voids that are not being spoken about, not even being aware of. So this is what I try and do with my clients. I say, right, we'll put your food issues here for a second. We're not going to ignore them. We're not going to deny them. We're going to validate them. We're going to think about them. We're definitely going to try and tackle them. But what's going on over here? You know, I use the iceberg method. The iceberg that sunk the Titanic wasn't the bit sticking out the water. It was what was underneath that they didn't see, that was hidden. They thought they missed it, but they didn't. It was there. That's emotional eating. That's all addictions, by the way. It's what is it feeding? You think you're feeding you. You're not. You're feeding something else. Some sort of emotion you don't want to deal with. Something you don't want to address. Some act of suppression. Push come to shove, everyone's different, but the psychology is kind of similar. That's what's going on. So it's about what is food being used to fill? What void? So one of the main voids that I see work time and time again, proven, tried, tested in my own life as well. Address the 7 voids, see which one is most applicable, appropriate. Some might be appropriate, some might not be at all. But we'll find the ones which are, and then we look to work on actions to fill those voids. And then over time, we'll see a reduction in emotional eating or overeating. Does that make sense?
Definitely. One of my other sort of anecdotes I was going to bring up, and I think I brought it up in a previous episode, was sort of in the past 12 months, my relationship ended and I moved out of a busy house with lots of kids to a small house on my own. My kids came over every other weekend, which was fine when they were there. But when the kids weren't there, it was just deadly silence.
Yeah.
And there were times in the first few weeks of me moving into this place, I did find myself binging. And it was one of those things. I knew it when I was in the shop buying the crappy food, and I sat there eating it knowing this is bullshit. Why am I doing this? But I still didn't stop. Luckily, like I said, I met a new girlfriend and I was able to talk it through with her. And she says, look, you're just not used to this environment. You've gone from like a really busy, loud household to a really quiet one. It's going to it's going to hit you hard. And it really was that. So I don't know if it was loneliness. It probably was a bit of loneliness. It was a bit of lack of community because, like I said, what was my norm had then just changed. But I think the good thing was I was able to talk it through with someone. I was able to identify what it was.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's a big thing, having support. Like the clients who come to me and I do ask them, maybe not as bluntly as like, oh, do you like your job or not? That's one of the voids, you know. I might be like, oh, tell us about your friends, tell us about your family, tell us about who you spend time with, you know, if you've got any hobbies. If they're starting to be like, no, and they're talking about how isolated, how lonely they feel, I know it's going to be way harder for them to give up their coping mechanism on food because it does make up. So what you've just said there, more obviously brand new life change, probably felt like you turned your life upside down for a little bit. One of the voids is actually, have you heard of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning? And he has certain quotes. He's a logotherapist. He was in a Nazi concentration camp in the war, actually, and he survived. And he talked about what he observed from a psychologist's point of view in the concentration camps. And he says, when someone has hope and meaning and a sense of certainty for the future, they can almost handle any why. You know, so if there's a reason why, if there's a reason why they can almost handle any how am I going to get through this? Well, that's the reason why. But when people's uncertainty is thrust away from them, that's when they just fall to pieces. And that's not a character flaw. That's human nature. We need hope to cope. And when we feel hopeless, so what I'm actually trying to do in a weird way is try and get my clients to evoke a sense of hope and connection to the future. That's the key ingredient. I don't think anyone can overcome addiction unless they have a sense of hope for the future. And I don't think you can create that on your own. You have to have support systems. You know, so you've got to surrender that I can't do this on my own. And I say this to a lot of my clients, often a who, not how. By them asking me for help, they've essentially tapped into that who, not how. Because the moment you try and solve every problem on your own, eventually you'll be at a point when you can't. And that's when you've got to surrender, you've got to relinquish control, you've got to ask for help. So those support systems are absolutely vital. And like, maybe you would still be in that situation, Mark, if you didn't have the support system that you had around you. It's so important that you remember that, because future challenges that come up for you, that's going to be your plug and play strategy again. You know, I can't do this on my own. I'm struggling. I've observed my behaviors. I need to tap into that support system. I need to speak up and ask for help straight away, you know, but a lot of people don't have that. And I understand that. That's why it's so hard.
That's really interesting. I didn't know the guy who did that research from the concentration camps, but I have heard about it quite a few times throughout my career, I suppose. And what I found really interesting is, am I right in thinking in that research, essentially the people in the concentration camps who had a family to live for, they were generally the ones who made it through those most horrific of circumstances. Yeah. Whereas if a lot of them whose family members had already been killed, gave up.
That's basically literally what he says in the book. The book's called Man's Search for Meaning. If anyone wants to check it out.
Really, really interesting. And I can see totally how that translates, you know, how we do, don't we? We generally, there's always going to be the side of us that wants to do it for us, want to look good in front of a mirror, want to look good on holiday, whatever that may be. But generally speaking, I think most of us are probably more concerned around living longer, being there to meet our grandkids and things like that. And that, again, all comes down to emotion. And this kind of brings me to my point here, is that as a man, I struggle horrendously with emotions. You know, my mental health was trauma related from years of dealing with quite severe trauma. And even to this day, after all the therapy, I struggle to understand my emotions. And that's why I think I emotionally eat, but because I can't understand my emotions, I struggle to then put it into perspective. Does that make sense? Is that something you see a lot with men?
I do work with men. I have male clients and I have worked with many men over the years, but it is majority female of people who reach out to us. So I do think, I mean, we're all blokes. There's definitely, as much as we like to talk about it, there's still a stigma around it, and many men feel weak in talking about that. So it's easier to keep calm and carry on. And men are very good at it. We're very useful as long as we've got work and we've got a family and we've got some sort of leverage to keep showing up for. Men can suppress their emotions all day long. Now, I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying they tend to be better at it. You know, like, call me a sexist pig, but I just think that's how the biology is hardwired, you know. So I think men are just better at suppressing, I think. So we're able to get through it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't go anywhere. But when I talk to just people in general, not necessarily men, a lot of people who have went through trauma, they do get good at being able to just completely suppress their emotions, because what's the alternative? Feel them again at a time in life when it was so unsafe to do so. So it's actually still, like I say, trauma happening from absolutely years ago. There's a book here I've read as well. I'm a big bookworm, in case you didn't know. Darren and Mark, the Realm of the Hungry Ghost. And that's all about using the word trauma as programming. So however you are programmed in the circumstances that you grew up in, especially before the brain was developed until about 25-year-old, which, if you think, well, okay, all the things that happened to us before 25-year-old, I didn't stand a bloody chance at being able to learn how to regulate my emotions from that. You know, so Gabor Matt talks about addiction and how a lot of it is trauma related, and it's an attempt to either bring pleasure to the pain, to get rid of the pain, or to suppress the pain through pleasure, or to distract, to numb, you know. So it can get to a point when you get so good at doing that you don't even know what emotions are. You don't even know how to feel them, because emotions are actually felt experiences in the body. Yeah. It's felt experiences in the body first, and then we label an attachment to them. So they say, I'm angry. Well, that's the spoken kind of description, but that might feel as a rapid heart rate, a lump in the throat, you know, knots in the stomach, you know, racing thoughts. It might be a felt sensory experience first, but because if people have been through trauma, they'll understand fight or flight and how scary that can be. The body's just like, well, no, I'm not going back there ever. It's too scary. So it just suppresses it. And that's why many people actually struggle to even know what to feel, how to feel, and it's just easier to bury it than ever let it out.
And I suppose on the back end of that, if you're, you know, if you're suppressing those emotions, a good way to do that would be through food, but through treating yourself, eating something that takes your mind off it in a weird way.
It's literally perfect for it. I'm not saying it's good, but you can temporarily, I mean, that's why you have to keep eating. Temporarily, you can numb any emotions from food, because back to what I said about 10 minutes ago, it's the most primal act of survival. You're on a desert island and your life had went completely up. Money didn't exist anymore. There was an apocalypse, but you managed to survive on this barren island. All you would care about would be food. That's it. Viktor Frankl talked about that in his book as well. One thing he did observe, and that's why I read it, because it's a lot of good research into like mental health around food. He said people got obsessed with food. They would dream about it, they would fantasize it, they would try and kill each other over pieces of bread. He says when people are traumatized, one of the easiest ways that can create a sense of control when life is completely out of control is, well, at least I'm eating, at least I'm controlling, I'm going to survive, at least I can control this. So that's why people turn to food in acts of trauma, because it's one of the only things you can control when everything else is completely out of control. And especially if you're a child or you're a teenager, you don't know how to regulate your emotions. It's been proven now. You can't fully regulate your emotions until the frontal cortex is developed. That's about 25-year-old. So, you know, you put two and two together, you realize where so many people struggled.
Yeah, maybe that's where I've gone wrong. I haven't developed fully yet, Mark. I'm still young at heart, I say. You're right. It makes a lot of sense. And actually, you know, my first ever, like Mark will say, when we were at school, in my early school years, even secondary, I was very fit and active. I think, you know, I used to do a lot of football, a lot of sport. And my eating problems started when I had something called slipped epiphysis of the hip. It's where the hip joint comes out, starts slipping off. And I was in and out of hospital, unable to walk, let alone run, for a good 2-3 years. And you're right. Looking back at it, I've realised that the only thing that I could control at that point, realistically, I can go out and play with friends, can go and do this. I could reward myself with food. I could eat ice cream. I could eat whatever I wanted to make myself feel better.
Yeah.
And I suppose when that happens over a 2-3 year period, it's no wonder then that you're going into your adult life with such bad habits that unfortunately set you up for a slippery slope.
Yeah, so what you said there, Darren, about like you would have got dopamine pleasure from doing your sport and getting a sense of enjoyment out of it. All of a sudden, that was taken away. Where are you going to get it from now? So I wouldn't say it's super common, but I've observed in the thousands of clients I've coached, maybe a few dozen who are like ex-athletes, or they had a promising, I don't know, I've had a few ones who are swimmers, netballers, divers, you know, and I think about myself, I was actually quite a good footballer. I was at Sunderland Academy at a young age, and, you know, got a great relationship with my dad now, but he did pressure us a lot when I was there, you know, a kid, to be an up-and-coming footballer. And I definitely think that had a role in my relationship with food as well. When I turned about 15 or 16, I think all lads who are into football, you know at that age if you're going to be a professional or not. And I knew I'm not, because I like drinking women too much. You know, that's when I discovered them. So basically, I knew I wasn't going to be a professional footballer, break my dad's heart. That's when I started drinking heavily and ballooning up and down in weight. You know, I'll go through periods where I'd be, you know, big and bulky, and I'm muscular, always have been, always exercise. So I'd be big and bulky like a rugby player. Then I'd get ripped and lean for the summer, and then I'd blow up again. And I would go like 40, 50 pounds fluctuating in short periods of time. And I'm like, yeah, when I stopped playing football and I realized I had that loss of identity, I'm not a footballer anymore, oh my God, what am I going to do? That's when other coping mechanisms, including food, started to come in, you know? So maybe it's similar for you. You had almost like a loss of identity. You weren't able to do this thing that gave you so much pleasure. It was taken away. You didn't know what to do to replace it. You just drifted subtly, but every day you just subtly drift into that. And a few years go by and you find yourself saying, how am I in this point? Why am I struggling? Why am I gaining weight? How do I get back to that? I've lost motivation. I think life can get so stressful and so busy when you throw marriage, kids, jobs, you know, bills, mortgages into the mix. 10 years can go by and you think, who the hell am I? You know, so a lot of clients I work with, they do reach almost that, I hate to say, but it's that midlife crisis age. You know, it's late 30s, 40s, 50s, and people have got this loss of identity. They may be grieving a past version of themselves that they're no longer able to be, but they don't know how to close that chapter and enter a new one. They feel a bit lost. They feel a bit purposeless. So I see that a lot, maybe not what you said specifically about particular injuries and operations and whatnot, but or whatever happened, but similar theming. You know what I'm saying? Like my brain just sees these things. A loss of identity is mixed to a big reason why people end up comfort eating who previously maybe never had a history of it. Maybe it's not around a childhood trauma. It might be for some people, but for some people it could be, I was a keen athlete, I was a keen this. All of a sudden it stopped, life changed. I just don't know what happened. And now I'm out of shape and now I'm struggling. But many men can relate to that listening to this podcast. Just a big life change, never able to recreate that pleasure that we're getting from one area of their life. And then food just conveniently took its place. It's very common that.
Yeah, so true, so true. And I was going to come on to food itself, and something I talk a lot about on this podcast is ultra processed food. And one of my bugbears is it's very much, I feel, engineered to drive over consumption. And so where does ultra processed food play in this whole conversation, would you say, Sam?
Well, it plays a huge role. Let's be honest. If any of us are like, screw it, I'm gonna binge eat, we're not thinking about broccoli, are we? We're thinking about the good stuff. So you're absolutely right. There's actually another great book. I'm dropping so many books tonight. You probably read it. Chris Van Tulliken, I think his name is, Ultra Processed People. That's the book. When I listened to that, I read that rather, I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense because there is chemicals in food that are like food-like substances, but they're not actual food. And you got to think a natural human 10,000 years ago would have never came across this high fructose corn syrup or this, fatty acid. I can't think they call them monosaturated fats or something. I can't remember the terminology. It's been years ago now. They're like heroin to the brain because they're like highly palatable foods where you can get huge amounts of calories in one go. Well, that taps into the whole survival thing. But the survival thing is I'm under threat. How can I get as many calories in me as possible? So these foods are like, wow, like we can't handle them. So the body just, it gets addicted to them. And they've proven some of these foods change neural pathways in the brain, impact metabolism in negative ways, loads of stuff. So yeah, that's opening a can of worms as well. So combine trauma, combine emotional voids in someone's life, a lack of awareness, and easily accessible, highly palatable, lovely tasting food. We've got a recipe for, we've saw the obesity epidemic since the 70s, 80s, 90s. It's going up decade after decade. We cannot ignore that the food processing and the access to processed foods and how easy is it to get a takeaway in 5 minutes on Just Eat? Is that playing a role? Absolutely. So again, this is why I need to have these conversations, because we can't pinpoint one thing and say that's to blame. We can't even say sugar is to blame. This is to blame. It's a multitude of reasons that all have just concocted together to create the life we've got right now. But yes, ultra processed foods, because let's be honest, that's what we all crave when we're looking for comfort, because those are the most comforting. They have the most sensory, they light up the taste buds, they have the most artificial sweeteners and whatever else they're putting into the food. So yeah, that is a big problem as well. So limiting your access to ultra processed food can definitely help. With some clients who I work with, they have to highlight what I call their red foods. I use like this traffic light system and say, is there any foods that you've maybe overate or binged on, but you can moderate them. You've had a history of being able to stop after one bag or one bar and move on. Some foods, they're like, no, I can't. I have one bar and I have to go to the shop and get more. I've got no history to be able to moderate it. There's probably a sensory thing there. It's probably some highly palatable processed food. There's some sort of like chemical reward reinforcement loop going on. We've got to sever that. So that's where placebo foods can come in. How can you mimic the same taste, but that isn't as highly processed, so you can retrain the brain out of relying on it. So there's loads of different strategies. But yeah, highly processed foods are just like kryptonite for any emotional eater, because there's the chemical reward aspect as well, and God knows what else. It's too complicated. I have to go right into that book again, but that's the book to go there for anyone who wants to know more about the ultra process and how much of a role that plays.
I guess it just kind of like, it's almost a double whammy and speeds up the whole emotional eating problem.
Yeah.
Because you've got a problem, maybe this is an addiction, and then you're just eating addictive food, which is engineered to be addictive.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't have the
twice.
It doesn't have it's the GLP-1 hormone, which is funnily enough a big thing right now. I'm probably get into that. But when you eat real food, like if you had 1,000 calories worth of steak, let's say that's 2 8-ounce steaks, after the second steak, you're going to be like, oh God, I cannot eat anymore. The food noise is turned off because your body's went, right, we've had enough, don't eat anymore. That's a survival thing. Because imagine 10,000 years ago when there were still predators and all that sort of stuff. If we found a woolly mammoth carcass and then we're just gorged on it until we're burst, right, we couldn't run away from the predators. So that's built into our evolution to say, you've had enough, stop, because we need to be mobile. But these ultra-processed food, the way they are treated and the chemicals in them, the body doesn't register that you had enough, so you can eat and eat and eat, and that's the danger, because there's no sense of fullness. People will totally mess with their body's like food intuition almost. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think what it is because the food is stripped of its nutrition. It's stripped of the vitamins, the minerals, all the essential nutrients. So your body eats it and it is effectively empty calories.
Yeah.
So your body's like, well, I've eaten, but I still need this, I still need this, I still need this. And so it still feels hungry. And that's why it continues to eat more.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you eat steak, you're getting your essential nutrition from it.
Yeah.
So you feel satisfied, you feel full quicker.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the most underrated strategies to deal with an urge to binge, and this might sound crazy, actually eat something. And what I mean is, go and make yourself a steak with a baked potato or something, or anything that you like. That's just proper food. Doesn't have to be super healthy, right? If we're struggling with binge eating, we'll probably want to work on the binging first before we even think about calorie deficits and all that sort of stuff. Let's sort the binge eating out. Go and eat something. I say that to my clients. You feel like binging? Go and have 6 apples, right? First of all, you won't be able to eat 6 apples because you'd be so full. And even if you did, you wouldn't want any more food after it because your body's registered as nutrients. So if you feel like you got that urge to binge, where people go wrong is they tell themselves, I'm not allowed to eat. I shouldn't eat. And that creates the reinforcement loop of wanting what you can't have. Then they think about all the junk food because your body's now trained to go, you are restricting, enter survival mode, food for survival. And this is all automatic, million miles an hour in your brain. It's all unconscious. You're not aware of this. So one of the best line of defense against overeating is like eat something properly first of all, then stop and say, right, do I still want more? So I often say that to my clients. If you feel like binging, ask yourself, when was the last time you had a proper meal? Like following the eat well plate, the fats, carbs, proteins. And a lot of the time, I'm not saying all the time, someone can eat the proper meal and still want more. Obviously, there's some deeper stuff going on. But a lot of the time, that initial urge, when the food noise rises, if you eat something properly and fill yourself up and go, right, do I still feel like eating? You might have a little bit of a sweet tooth, but it's not going to be that insatiable, oh my God, I want to binge anymore. It's just not going to be. So you can create your own GLP-1 hormone without the injection by eating lots of fiber, by eating healthy fats and eating protein. So try and eat something first before you rely on willpower to not eat at all. Because trying to white knuckle the way through an urge, especially if you've had a history of binging anyway, you might survive the day, but you're going to survive the next day. You're going to survive the next day. It's a matter of time before the dam bursts. So always make sure you're eating enough. A lot of emotional eaters or binge eaters restrict after a binge and then wonder why they binge the next day. And then they're just reinforcing this loop of starvation, overconsumption, starvation, overconsumption. Eat properly first. Follow the eat well plate. Where's my carbs? Where's my protein? Where's my veg? And if you're having a normal size plate, 2 or 3 rounds of that a day, you'll see most of your urges will just be way, way easier to manage. The first thing I want to do with the client is make sure they're eating enough quality food to at least satisfy normal amounts of hunger, create that GLP-1 hormone where your body's like, yeah, I'm full, thank you, mate. And then if there is a little bit of leftover, I could just have this, could have that, we'll be able to actually work through it with some other strategies, So yeah, eat proper food. It's one of your first line of defenses against binge eating.
Yeah. And so I think you kind of touched on it about that sort of binge restrict cycle. And it's almost, you restrict too much, it makes overeating worse because you'll last for a day, maybe 2 days, but then you'll just be like, fuck it.
Yeah.
And it leads to that, the trap that almost everyone is caught in is, will be good all week. Monday to Friday or Monday to maybe Friday lunchtime, all good. Knock off on Friday, get a takeaway. Saturday, few beers, maybe some sweet treats and that. And you have that weekend blowout, don't you?
Yeah.
And
I call that the all or nothing mindset.
Like
Yeah, it's the all or nothing mindset. So I mentioned a framework before called the 7 voids. That's some of like the deeper stuff going on in someone's emotional life. The 5 patterns of overeating, which I've come up with, is what path leads to overeating kind of in the moment. It's more like what we're observing in reality right now, not hidden under the surface. And if I speak to certain clients, maybe they said what you've just said, I'm good all week. And then Monday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I just can't stick to it. I'm off the rails. So how much of that all or nothing thinking is coming from too much restriction, too much attachment to being good, not eating what I call authentically, to where you're trying to like cut all foods out. You may be trying to achieve weight loss too fast. So restrictive forms of eating often lead to the all or nothing mindset. And there's 2 ways that happens is, well, one, someone could be just dropping the calories too low. So food obsession rises, like Viktor Frankl talked about in the concentration camps. When food is scarce, food focus, which is food noise, same thing, just massively increases. So you definitely don't want to be thinking about food all week and planning what you're going to have to eat on the weekend. That suggests you're being too restrictive. You're not fulfilled enough. So you're creating this all or nothing relationship with food. But then also if you restrict after you overeat and you say, right, I'm going to be good now, I'm going to cut everything out. I'm going to do 5 days of no carbs. You're actually creating a punishment reinforcement loop on your brain. You're basically punishing yourself. You're becoming your own abuser. You weren't good, so here's what I'm going to do to you. That's a dangerous path to walk down, and you don't even realize that you can do it. So again, I come back to the history of trauma and abuse that a lot of people who struggle with that eating have went through. They don't even realize it, that they have become their own abuser with the way they speak to themselves, the way they treat themselves, and how that manifests through food behaviors. So the all or nothing mindset is one of the 5 patterns of overeating that I see. It's like we need to get rid of this all or nothing mindset, which means we'll have to maybe temporarily wanting to achieve fast weight loss. We've got to say, right, weight loss is the next stage after you heal your relationship with food, after you stabilize your eating habits. Because if they're constantly every day, like beating themselves up for how they look, and then that's driving restrictive diets and cutting out carbs and, trying to be good all week without even thinking that they're allowed a protein bar or a slice of cake or, I say to my clients, like, a bar of chocolate's not the problem. It's if you beat yourself up after eating one and decide to have 10, that's the problem. It's calorie deficit. That's what weight loss is. You guys will know. You've been on your own journey. It's calorie deficit. You move more than you eat, or your calories are set up to where you're in a deficit, and you make sure your exercise creates a deficit, and you make sure the amount of food you're eating is within that deficit as well. Combination of the two, you lose weight. It's a maths equation. But when we're trying to punish ourselves, we'll drop the calories too low, or we'll be very restricted with food. We'll say, I'm not allowed this, I'm not allowed that. We'll just fantasize over it, and we'll create this all or nothing cycle. And then when we eventually break, the punishment, reinforcement, abuse cycle, self-abuse cycle starts. Oh, I knew you were too greedy. I knew you'd fail. You always do this. Right, what am I going to do? Try even harder next time. Restrict even harder. And you reinforce the same cycle. So the all or nothing cycle is often fueled by feelings of inadequacy, feelings of shame, attaching self-worth to weight loss, which is very dangerous. I mean, it's important that you want to better yourself, and I'm pro weight loss. I'm just anti doing it the wrong way, and that's definitely the wrong way.
It's been really interesting, because I feel like as you've been talking, it's like in my head, I'm like, tick, tick, tick. That's me. Like, that's me, that's me, that's me.
Yeah.
I felt that so much in this episode. And it's been really sort of really interesting chatting. But what I'm sort of going to come on to here is, if you're unsure as to whether you emotionally eat, what's the sort of best way to identify whether it is emotional eating or whether it is just bad diet? Because I think we started this episode of saying, you do get people with a bit of a sugar addiction with just bad habits, and then you get emotional eating. How do you identify emotional eating?
So this is why I called the book Why You Overeat, and not Why You Emotionally Eat, because overeating is the behavior. Let's take all of the thoughts of emotions out. We're analyzing someone's behavior. They're overeating. You're eating too much. So regardless of how you get there, it always leads to overeating. Then within that, there'd be maybe emotional eating. So that could be clearly defined. Yeah, when I feel this emotion, I don't like it. I don't know what to do. I look for comfort, and I use food to suppress the emotion. So that would maybe be emotional eating. Yeah. But then I also work with some clients who maybe be a bit ADHD or neurotypical. A lot of it could be sensory eating. Like, they've been working in a school and the kids have been shouting and screaming all day, and they come home and then they've got their kids shouting and screaming who they're now supposed to mother or father. And they're like, oh my God, I felt so touched out and overstimulated. They weren't necessarily triggered by this particular event. It was that they just felt like their head was racing and they needed to calm down. So there's a sensory aspect to eating as well. So it's not all emotional. There could be a sensory form of it. There could be an emotional part of it. A lot of it could just be habit. Like, someone like sits down at the end of the day, watches Netflix, watches a particular TV program, sits in a certain position in the sofa, and they're so used to the hand going in a bag of crisps. They're not emotional. They're not triggered. It's all habitual. So that's why I call the book Overeating, Why You Overeat, because within that, there'll be emotional eating, there'll be deeper emotional eating, like trauma response directly related to that. And there'll be some habitual, there'll be some, all or nothing. So yeah, emotional eating is kind of, it's overeating's the umbrella. Underneath the umbrella, you've got the different branches of it. So some people might not necessarily be an emotional eater, but the reality is they still overeat. So we just have to say, right, it's all overeating, okay? And if someone was to say, oh, well, I'm not an emotional eater, so none of this applies to me, they're missing the point, because in some way, shape or form, they're still overeating. So why are you doing it? It might not be an emotion driving it. It could be something else. But it normally always is an emotional eater, to be honest. Most people say, oh, I don't think I'm an emotional eater. 9 times out of 10, they are really. They just don't know it yet. They just don't know how to get there. They don't know the exact, there's where the pain's located. These are the symptoms. How do we assess the symptoms to get a diagnosis? That's what a doctor would do if you went in the hospital for an x-ray or something. Where's the pain? Oh, it's over here. Okay, does it hurt when I do that? No. Does it hurt when I do this? Yes. Okay. Put it under the x-ray. Right, you've broken this bone in that area. Here's the treatment plan. But a lot of people, they're in denial. They don't want to deal with it. It's easier to go, oh, I'll just go on a diet. Oh, I just need to be more, I need to have more willpower. So a lot of people who think they're not emotional eaters really are. They've just never done the digging to see what type they are. And you ask me about how do you start? Well, shameless plug, get my book. It's all in there.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So just to sort of like bring this to some conclusion, right? We try and sort of end with a decent question. So I suppose if someone feels completely out of control at the moment with food,
Yeah.
And that, like, they've been listening to the episode, and because I think with the overeating thing, you're right, but they've been listening to the episode, and they just think, you know, where to start. They're going to order your book. But what's the one thing they could do today to start tomorrow? Just one small thing to start that journey once they read your book, of course.
Question. Carl Jung, I referenced him before, right? He's my favorite, like, well, not that I'm a fan of like psychologists in general, but I'm into it, right? So he's someone who I look up to a lot and read a lot of his books. I have read parts of his books and done a lot of studying on them. And he says before transformation is possible, awareness comes first. So awareness is the first part of transformation. So if someone, like you said, feels out of control, they have finally crossed that threshold of denial. I am overeating. I'm an emotional eater or an overeater. I might even have serious disordered eating, some category of that, right? They've accepted it. They don't know what to do about it yet, but they've finally accepted it, right? Now we need to cross the next threshold of awareness about why am I overeating? You'll never be able to change your eating habits until you know exactly what benefit food was giving you. And the thing about behaviors, all human behaviors, no matter how destructive they are in the long term, in the short term, they are self-serving. We all know overeating or someone drinking alcohol or doing whatever else, we know it leads to destruction and nothing but negativity in the long run, but in the short run, people still do it. This is what addiction is. It's short-term pleasure, because the way the brain is, it's about getting out of pain, so much so it doesn't even care about the long-term consequences. It just wants pleasure now. So until you ever figure out how to stop overeating or how to lose weight or how to put it all together, you've got to know, well, what was I getting from food? What benefit was food giving me? It was helping me with this. It was helping me deal with that. It was helping me avoid that. So I would go through that 7 void framework, so I briefly went through them before. So number 1 is like lack of connection to your job. If you hate your job, it's hard to have a fulfilling life. You work what? 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and throw kids and bills and marriages and mortgages on the side. Haven't got a lot of time for yourself. That might tie into the other thing as well, just lack of fulfillment, lack of joy, lack of hobbies. You feel like you're just working, coming home, paying bills, looking after everyone else. Your only pleasure is food. So have you got to disconnect with the way you live in your life? Is it your job? Is it your marriage? Is it your lack of hobbies? Is there some traumas, like you said before, that are still playing a role? And food is actually a coping response. It's a trauma response. It's no one will hurt me if I'm big and I'm overweight, and like I said, there's a massive link to sexual abuse and things like that. The next one is like lack of connection to nature. We mentioned Chris Van Tullogen's book, Ultra Processed People, before, but we can get these chemicals from real food and from nature, from vitamin D, from sunlight, from fresh air, from a sense of community. So many people are living this fake lifestyle where it's all processed everything, processed screens, processed relationships. They're on Tinder swiping right instead of meeting people and talking. They're talking to their friends on WhatsApp rather than meeting them in person. Their jobs are at home. They're not leaving the house for days on end. So is there a disconnect with the way they're living their life? Is there a lack of connection to nature? It's void number 5. Number 6, it's about comparison to other people. Are you saying I'm not as good as that person because they are better than me in some way, shape or form? So you feel like you're low on the pecking order. You feel like you're low in status, you're low in worth, you're low in value. And is food like an act of self-soothing, like an animal licking its wound because you don't feel good enough as part of this hierarchy? And then void number 7 is you're just kind of the classic person who's just lost that way a little bit. They're purposeless. They're maybe in between careers or relationships. They don't really know what they're working towards anymore. Maybe life's changed, like we said before. One chapter has closed, but they haven't fully opened the door to a new chapter yet. They don't really know where they are. So I would just go through the 7 voids and be like, which ones are coming up for me? A lot of people say, oh my God, all of them. Okay, like that can happen. Sometimes people will be like, well, it's not this, it's not that, but God, it's that. So until you can move forward, the first thing you need to do is go, well, why am I eating? Because until you address the why, it'll keep happening. It'll happen unintentionally. You'll not know what food was giving you. And then what we do is we don't say, right, I'm just going to go on a diet. We go, I'm going to replace the void that I was feeding food with something else. I'm going to get fulfillment, pleasure, a sense of hope, sense of connection, sense of support, sense of certainty from something that isn't food. So we'll look to introduce new habits, and then we'll see a reduction in the old one, which is food. Yeah.
And I just want to say, Sam, before we finish, we will link the book in the bio to the podcast. So if someone's thinking, yeah, I wouldn't mind reading that, if you're listening, you've not seen the books that have been coming up, that Mark put on the screen right now, then the link to the book will be in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely love that, Sam. And I think we could have gone on for another hour or so. I'll say it right now, and I'm sure Darren will agree. You are welcome on any time. We will get you back on a few months down the line. And I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I think we've only really just scratched the surface of it, if truth be told.
Yeah, I agree with you. We could talk for hours. I haven't even gone into some of the other deeper frameworks, but I always like to talk about the 7 voids and the noticing your pattern of overeating, because I'll go back to that final point before we wrap this up. The doctor's analogy. Really think of that whole diagnosis process. If you walk into a doctor's and you're like, oh, my leg's hurting, they don't just throw you in an x-ray machine and then put your leg in a cast and you're walking out thinking, well, it was my arm. It's like, that's what trying to go on a diet is, to address all of the psychological reasons behind why you overeat. It's just like, I'll just ignore all of that. Like, I've got a bleed on the brain here, but I'll just put a sticky plaster on my finger and hope that I lose weight. It's like, I know that sounds ridiculous, what I've just said, but that's what it is. So what a doctor would do, locate the pain. Right, what's going on? So related to the body, they'd say, oh, it's over here, it's over there. What are the symptoms? Related to eating would be like, okay, well, what emotions are you feeling? How do you experience them? What environments are triggering you right now? When are your binges happening? Are they late at night? Are they early in the morning? How frequent are they? We're trying to assess, based off some sort of diagnostic, we're trying to assess a likely outcome or a likely set of symptoms that relate to, okay, you're this type of overeater, or this is what you've got, or this is the next treatment plan for you. So we've got to determine people's patterns, where their pain is, what the emotions are, their backstory. Just like a doctor would ask questions about what's going on, and they would assess based off of those questions, oh, this is probably what's happening. Let's try a treatment plan for that. Overeaters, or anyone who struggles with their eating, or who just wants to lose weight, needs to go through that. It doesn't have to be as extreme as that, but it can be like, right, why am I overeating? Where do I do it? How frequently? Do I even notice subtle differences about who I overeat around? Is it on my own? Is it secret eating? Is it with certain people? Is it on a weekend versus a Monday to Friday? And start noticing patterns. Create so much self-awareness that you're like, I know myself inside out. And only then will you be able to go, I think I know what to do to stop. Until you've done that, it's like going into the battlefield with a blindfold on. You just don't even know. And then you get took by surprise. And then you go, oh, I did it again. I overate. And so many people feel out of control with that eating, not because they're incapable, because they just haven't learned yet. If you get in a car for the first time, you don't know how to drive it. But imagine beating yourself up and being like, yeah, I'll never drive a car. That's just the way it is. You got to go through your lessons. So create awareness. After awareness, then comes transformation.